The crowd of weathered men fell silent as the girl was dragged onto the makeshift auction platform, a dirty burlap sack covering her head and shoulders. Dust swirled around her ankles in the hot Arizona Territory air of 1878, her simple dress tattered and stained with the evidence of her arduous journey. Samuel Reed stood at the back of the gathering, his hand instinctively moving to the worn handle of his Colt revolver as disgust crawled up his spine. "Next up, gentlemen, fresh off the wagon train from back east." The auctioneer's voice boomed across the crowd, his sweaty face gleaming in the afternoon sun. "This one's unspoiled goods, I guarantee it. Young, strong, and ready for whatever work you need done." The crowd rumbled with laughter, their intentions clear. Sam clenched his jaw as his eyes fixed on the trembling figure. The wind picked up, whipping his duster around his legs as he stepped forward. These impromptu bride auctions had become all too common in Silver Creek, a lawless mining town where the new sheriff seemed conveniently absent whenever such events took place. "Let's start the bidding at $20, the auctioneer called out, yanking the rope binding the girl's wrists. "Who'll give me 20 for this fine specimen?" "20, called a voice from the crowd. "25 here," shouted another. Sam watched as the bidding climbed higher, the miners and cowboys growing more animated with each bid. $50. $75. The girl stood motionless, her face hidden, her future being bartered away by men who saw her as nothing more than property. $100. Called a gruff voice that Sam recognized as belonging to Jeb Wallace, the owner of the territory's largest silver mine. Wallace was known for his cruelty to his workers and his habit of collecting young women who rarely survived more than a year in his household, going once for $100. The auctioneer began. "200, Sam called out, his voice cutting through the crowd like a knife. Heads turned toward him, eyes narrowed in his direction. "Well now," the auctioneer grinned, revealing tobacco-stained teeth, "looks like we got ourselves a serious bidder." 200 from the cowboy in the back, 250, Wallace countered, his face reddening with anger. Sam stepped forward, pushing through the crowd until he stood at the front. $500, he said firmly, his gaze locked with Wallace's. A hushed murmur rippled through the crowd. $500 was a small fortune in these parts, Wallace spat on the ground. "She ain't worth that much, Reed." The auctioneer's eyes widened at the sum. 500 going once, going twice, sold to Samuel Reed. Sam approached the platform, counting out the bills from a leather pouch. He'd been saving that money to expand his small ranch, but some things mattered more than additional acreage. He handed the money to the auctioneer, who quickly pocketed it before untying the rope that bound the girl to the platform. "She's all yours, Reed," the man said with a wink that made Sam's skin crawl. "Enjoy your purchase." Sam ignored him, gently taking the girl's bound hands. "Come with me, miss," he said quietly. "You're safe now." She followed without resistance, her steps unsteady. He could feel the stares of the crowd burning into his back as he led her away from the auction platform toward his horse tethered at the hitching post. Only when they were a distance from the crowd did Sam stop. "I'm going to take that sack off your head now, if that's all right," he said softly. "I won't hurt you." When she didn't respond, he carefully reached up and lifted the rough burlap sack from her head. As the cloth came away, Sam's breath caught in his throat. Hair the color of burnished copper cascaded down her shoulders, framing a face of such delicate beauty it might have been carved by angels. But it was her eyes that held him captive, the clearest shade of green he'd ever seen, like spring leaves dappled with sunlight. Despite the dirt smudged on her cheeks and the fear evident in her expression, she looked at him with a dignity that spoke of inner strength. "An angel," Sam whispered before he could stop himself. She blinked at him, caution and confusion warring in those remarkable eyes. "Are you going to hurt me?" Her voice was soft but steady with a hint of an Eastern accent. Sam shook his head quickly. "No, miss. I bought your contract to save you from those men. You're free to go wherever you please." He reached for his knife and she flinched. "Just to cut these ropes," he explained, carefully slicing through the bindings around her wrists. As the ropes fell away, she rubbed at the raw skin beneath. I have nowhere to go, she said simply. They took everything. What's your name? Sam asked. Hannah, she replied after a moment's hesitation. Hannah Morgan. I'm Samuel Reed, Sam. He removed his hat, suddenly conscious of his appearance, 3 days' worth of stubble, trail dust coating his clothes. I have a small ranch about an hour's ride from here. You can stay there until you figure out what you want to do. I'll sleep in the barn. Hannah studied him, clearly weighing her limited options. Why did you help me, Mr. Reed? Sam replaced his hat, uncomfortable with the direct question. Because it was wrong what they were doing. No person should be sold like cattle. A hint of a smile touched her lips. There aren't many men who would part with $500 based on principle alone. It's just money, Sam said with a shrug, can be earned again. A commotion from the direction of the auction drew their attention. Jeb Wallace was stalking toward them, flanked by 2 of his miners. Reed, Wallace shouted. I ain't done bidding on that girl. Sam subtly positioned himself between Hannah and the approaching men. The auction's over, Wallace. She's not for sale. Wallace sneered, his hand hovering near his pistol. Everything's for sale in Silver Creek, you know that. Not today, Sam replied evenly, though his heart hammered in his chest. He wasn't a gunfighter by nature, but he'd learned to stand his ground in the 4 years since coming west. You think you're better than the rest of us? Wallace's face contorted with rage. Riding in here, playing the hero? I think this conversation is over, Sam said. Miss Morgan is coming with me and we're leaving peacefully. Unless you want to explain to the territorial marshal why you're interfering with a legal transaction. Wallace's eyes narrowed as he calculated his options. The territorial marshal might turn a blind eye to the auctions, but outright theft and assault would be harder to ignore, especially against a respected rancher like Reed. This ain't over, Wallace finally spat, backing away. Nobody crosses me in my town. Noted, Sam replied coolly, though inwardly he knew he'd made a dangerous enemy. Miss Morgan, shall we? He helped her onto his horse before mounting behind her, one arm carefully placed around her waist to steady her as they rode away from Silver Creek. Hannah sat stiffly at first, clearly uncomfortable with their proximity, but as the town receded behind them, she gradually relaxed. Thank you, she said quietly after they'd been riding for some time. Sam nodded, though she couldn't see it. You're welcome, Miss Morgan. Hannah, she corrected. After what you've done, I think you can call me Hannah. Hannah, he repeated, the name feeling right on his tongue. Were you really on a wagon train? She was silent for so long that Sam thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was tight with suppressed emotion. Yes. From Boston. My father died 6 months ago, leaving significant debts. I was traveling west to live with my aunt in San Francisco. She paused. Our wagon train was attacked 3 days ago. Bandits. They killed the men and took whatever they wanted, including the women. Sam's grip on the reins tightened. I'm sorry. They separated us. I don't know what happened to the others. Her voice trembled slightly. I was brought to Silver Creek last night. They rode in silence for a while, the rhythmic sound of hoofbeats punctuating the stillness of the open landscape. The sun was beginning to set, painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson. My ranch isn't much, Sam said eventually. Just a small house, a barn, some fenced pasture. I raise horses, mainly. It sounds lovely, Hannah replied, and Sam could hear the exhaustion in her voice. We'll be there soon, he promised. You can rest, eat a proper meal. When they finally crested the hill overlooking his property, Sam felt a surge of pride despite its modest appearance. The single-story ranch house stood solid against the backdrop of mountains, with a corral of horses visible to one side and a small garden plot beside the house. Welcome to the Double R, he said as they approached. It's not much, but it's home. Hannah looked at the neat little ranch with something like wonder. After the horrors she'd experienced, even this simple homestead must have seemed like paradise. Sam helped her down from the horse and led her into the house. It was a simple place, a main room with a stone fireplace, a small kitchen area, a bedroom, and a storeroom he'd converted into a second smaller bedroom when his younger brother had briefly lived with him 2 years ago. You can take the main bedroom, Sam said, lighting a lamp as darkness fell. I'll prepare it for you, I couldn't possibly take your bedroom, Hannah protested. The other room is too small and has been used for storage, Sam explained, and I won't hear of you sleeping anywhere but a proper bed after what you've been through. Too tired to argue further, Hannah sank into a chair by the table while Sam quickly straightened the bedroom, changing the sheets and clearing away his personal items. When he returned, he found her dozing, her head resting on her arms at the table. "Hannah," he said gently, "the room is ready." She stirred, blinking up at him with those remarkable green eyes. "Thank you, Sam, for everything." "There's water in the pitcher by the bed if you want to wash up," he told her. "I'll fix us something to eat." He busied himself preparing a simple meal of beans, bacon, and cornbread he'd baked the day before. When Hannah emerged from the bedroom some time later, she'd washed the dirt from her face and hands and attempted to smooth her copper hair, which now fell in waves down her back. They ate mostly in silence, Hannah too exhausted for conversation, and Sam unsure what to say to the beautiful woman fate had unexpectedly placed in his home. After the meal, she thanked him again and retired to the bedroom, while Sam made up a bed for himself on a blanket near the fireplace. As he lay awake, staring at the ceiling beams in the flickering firelight, Sam wondered what the morning would bring. Hannah Morgan was unlike any woman he'd ever met, educated, refined, and far too good for the harsh realities of frontier life. She would likely want to continue to San Francisco as soon as possible, to the safety of her aunt's home. The thought left him feeling strangely hollow. Outside, an owl called into the night, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote answered. Sam closed his eyes and tried to sleep, aware that his life had irrevocably changed the moment he'd lifted that burlap sack and looked into the face of an angel. Hannah woke to unfamiliar surroundings, momentary panic gripping her before the events of the previous day came rushing back. The auction. The burlap sack. The cowboy who'd saved her. Samuel Reed. Sunlight streamed through the small window, illuminating a room that, while simple, spoke of care and attention. The bed was sturdy, the sheets clean. A washstand held a pitcher and basin, and a small mirror hung on the wall. Her tattered dress lay where she'd dropped it, a stark reminder of all she'd lost. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Miss Morgan, are you awake?" "Yes," she called back, pulling the blanket around herself. "Just a moment." "I've left some clothes outside the door," Sam's voice came through the wood. "They belonged to my sister-in-law before she and my brother moved to Colorado. They might fit you better than anything of mine." Hannah heard his footsteps retreat, then carefully opened the door to find a folded stack of clothing, a simple calico dress, undergarments, and even a pair of worn but serviceable boots. She quickly dressed, grateful to be rid of her soiled garments, though the dress was a bit loose around her waist after days with little food. When she finally emerged from the bedroom, she found Sam at the stove, the scent of coffee and frying bacon filling the small house. "Good morning," he said, turning to her with a smile that transformed his weathered face. In the clear light of day, Hannah took in his appearance properly for the first time. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly at the collar of his shirt. His eyes were a warm brown, crinkling at the corners when he smiled. "Good morning," she replied, suddenly self-conscious. "Thank you for the clothes." "They suit you," he said, then quickly turned his attention back to the skillet. "Breakfast is almost ready. I hope you're hungry." They ate at the small table, Sam watching with evident satisfaction as Hannah consumed 2 helpings of everything. "You needed that," he commented as she finally pushed her plate away. "I haven't eaten properly in days," she admitted. "The bandits gave us barely enough to keep us alive." Sam's expression darkened. "If I knew who they were—" "It doesn't matter now," Hannah interrupted. "What's done is done. Do you remember anything about them? The law should know." Hannah closed her eyes briefly, reluctant to revisit those terrible memories. There were at least 10 of them. Their leader had a scar across his cheek, and they all wore red bandanas. Sam's fork clattered against his plate. "The Red Scarf Gang. They've been terrorizing this part of the territory for months." "You know them, of them," Sam clarified. "They've hit a few settlements and wagon trains. The territorial marshal has a posse after them, but they know this country too well." He hesitated. Hannah, I think you should stay here until they're caught. It's not safe for you to travel. She looked down at her hands, considering his words. I should contact my aunt in San Francisco. She'll be worried when the wagon train doesn't arrive. I can send a telegram from Silver Creek, Sam offered. Let her know you're safe. Hannah nodded gratefully. And I should find work as soon as possible. I can't impose on your kindness indefinitely. You're not imposing, Sam said quickly. And there's no rush. You've been through an ordeal. Rest, recover. We can figure out the rest later. After breakfast, Sam showed her around the small ranch. The double R might have been modest compared to some of the sprawling cattle operations in the territory, but it was immediately evident that it was a labor of love. The barn was well maintained, the corral sturdy, and the horses, about 20 in all, were clearly well cared for. They're beautiful, Hannah said as they approached the corral. Several horses trotted over, curious about the newcomer. Mustangs, mostly, Sam explained, a note of pride in his voice. I capture them from the wild herds, then gentle and train them before selling them to ranchers or the cavalry. A sleek black stallion approached the fence, his intelligent eyes assessing Hannah. That's Midnight, Sam said, my personal mount and the best horse I've ever known. Hannah cautiously extended her hand, and after a moment's consideration, the horse nudged it gently. He likes you, Sam observed, sounding surprised. He's usually wary of strangers. I've always had a way with horses, Hannah admitted. My father kept several for his medical practice in Boston. Your father was a doctor, Hannah nodded, one of the best in the city. But he was better at medicine than managing money. When he died, the creditors took everything. Sam leaned against the fence post. Is that why you were heading west? A fresh start? Partly, she said. My aunt wrote that San Francisco is growing rapidly, and there's demand for educated women to serve as teachers or companions to wealthy families. I thought I might find suitable employment there. You're educated then? Hannah smiled faintly. My father believed women deserved the same educational opportunities as men. I attended the Boston Female Academy until I was 18. Sam whistled low. No wonder you seem different from most women out here. Different isn't always better, Hannah replied, looking out at the vast landscape surrounding the ranch. My education doesn't help much in this environment. Don't be so sure, Sam said. Brains are useful anywhere. He pushed away from the fence. I need to ride into town for supplies and to send that telegram. Will you be all right here alone for a few hours? Hannah nodded, though the thought of being alone made her nervous. I'll be fine. There's a shotgun inside the door if you need it, Sam told her, his expression serious. And Hank, my ranch hand, should be back from his sister's place by midday. He lives in the small cabin beyond the barn. I didn't realize you had help, Hannah said. Just Hank. He's getting on in years, but he knows horses better than anyone. He's been visiting his sister since her husband broke his leg in a mining accident. Sam adjusted his hat. I won't be long. Make yourself at home. After Sam departed, Hannah returned to the house and surveyed the interior with new eyes. It was clean but Spartan, lacking the feminine touches that would make it truly a home. Acting on impulse, she rolled up her sleeves and set to work, determined to repay Sam's kindness in whatever small way she could. She swept the floors, washed the breakfast dishes, and tidied the main room. In the pantry, she found ingredients to prepare a stew for the evening meal, setting it to simmer slowly on the back of the stove. By midday, the house smelled of cooking food and the fresh wildflowers she'd gathered and arranged in a jar on the table. She was so absorbed in her tasks that she didn't hear the approaching footsteps until a knock at the door startled her. Remembering Sam's warning about the shotgun, she approached cautiously. "Hello," called a gruff voice. "Mr. Reed, you in there?" Gathering her courage, Hannah opened the door to find an elderly man with a weathered face and kind eyes standing on the porch. "Well now," he said, removing his hat. "You ain't Sam?" "No," Hannah agreed. "I'm Hannah Morgan. You must be Hank." The old cowboy nodded, clearly confused. "That I am, miss. Is Sam around?" "He rode into town," Hannah explained. "He said you'd be returning today." Hank studied her curiously. "Don't recall Sam mentioning any lady visitors." It's a recent development, Hannah said, then briefly explained the circumstances that had brought her to the double R, omitting the more traumatic details. Hank's weathered face softened. Well, Miss Morgan, Sam's a good man, one of the best I've known. You're in safe hands here. I believe that, Hannah said sincerely. Would you like some coffee? It's fresh. Hank accepted the invitation, and they sat at the table while Hannah served him coffee and some of the cornbread left from breakfast. The old cowboy regaled her with stories of the early days of the territory and of Sam's arrival 4 years prior. He came out here with nothing but determination and that black stallion of his, Hank told her. Most folks gave him 6 months before he'd hightail it back east. But he proved them wrong, built this place up from nothing. He seems very capable, Hannah observed. Hank chuckled. Stubborn is what he is, but in a good way. He took a sip of his coffee. This place has been lonely since his brother and sister-in-law moved to Colorado last year. Do him good to have someone around besides this old cowpoke. Before Hannah could respond to the implication, the sound of approaching hoofbeats announced Sam's return. He entered the house carrying several parcels, his face breaking into a smile at the sight of Hannah and Hank at the table. I see you two have met, he said, setting down his burdens. Miss Morgan's been keeping me entertained, Hank said, rising. Better get back to those horses. They've probably forgotten what work looks like after a week with my sister's coddling. After Hank departed, Sam looked around the house, noticing the changes Hannah had made. You didn't have to do all this, he said. I wanted to, she replied. It's the least I could do after your kindness. Sam hung his hat on a peg by the door. I sent the telegram to your aunt. The telegraph operator said it should reach San Francisco in a day or two. Thank you, Hannah said. Did you have any trouble in town? A shadow crossed Sam's face. Wallace was there watching me. He didn't approach, but I could feel his eyes on me the whole time. I've put you in danger, Hannah said quietly. Sam shook his head. Wallace and I have never seen eye to eye, even before yesterday. Don't worry about him. But Hannah couldn't help worrying as she served the stew she'd prepared. The idea that she'd brought trouble to this kind man's doorstep weighed heavily on her conscience. Yet beneath that concern was a growing awareness of Sam himself, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the gentle strength in his hands, the quiet confidence in his movements. She was in danger of developing feelings for Samuel Reed, and that was a complication she couldn't afford. Once her aunt replied to the telegram, Hannah would need to continue her journey to San Francisco. This brief interlude at the Double R would become nothing more than a pleasant memory. As they ate dinner, Sam told her about his plans for the ranch, the additional horses he hoped to acquire, the expanded breeding program he envisioned. Hannah found herself drawn into his dreams, offering suggestions that he received with genuine interest rather than the dismissal she might have expected from a man of the frontier. You have a good head for business, he commented after she proposed a way to increase his profits by focusing on horses specifically bred for cavalry requirements. Hannah smiled ruefully. Perhaps if my father had consulted me, we wouldn't have lost everything when he died. His loss, Sam said simply, and in those 2 words was a recognition of her worth that Hannah hadn't expected to find in the Arizona territory. As night fell, they sat together by the fireplace, the flames casting dancing shadows on the walls. In Boston, such intimate proximity to an unmarried man would have been scandalous, but here in the wilderness, conventional proprieties seemed less important than the human connection they were forming. Tell me about your life before, Sam said, his voice low in the firelit room. Who was Hannah Morgan in Boston? Hannah gazed into the flames, memories washing over her. I was my father's assistant in many ways. After my mother died when I was 12, I took over running the household and eventually began helping with his medical practice. I organized his papers, mixed simpler remedies, sometimes even assisted with patients when his regular nurse was unavailable. You know medicine then, some, Hannah acknowledged. Nothing formal, but I absorbed a great deal from my father. I can set a bone, stitch a wound, recognize common illnesses. Sam nodded thoughtfully. Useful skills out here. The nearest doctor is in Tucson, almost 2 days' ride. "What about you?" Hannah asked. "What brought you west?" Sam was quiet for a long moment, and Hannah wondered if she'd overstepped. Finally, he spoke, his eyes still fixed on the dancing flames. "I was engaged back in Missouri. Her name was Elizabeth. We had plans: a farm, children, the life we'd build together." His voice grew distant. "Then the influenza came through our town. She was one of the first to fall ill, one of the first to die." "I'm so sorry," Hannah whispered. Sam nodded, acknowledging her sympathy. "Afterward, I couldn't stay. Everything reminded me of her, of the future we'd never have. My brother Stephen suggested we head west, make a fresh start. We came out here together, started this place. Then he met Catherine, they got married, had a child, and eventually decided Colorado offered better opportunities for a family." "You didn't want to go with them?" Sam shook his head. "This is my home now. I've put too much of myself into this land to abandon it." He looked at her directly. "What about you? Was there someone in Boston?" Hannah smiled sadly. "There was a young doctor who worked with my father. He expressed interest, but when father died and our financial situation became clear, his interest quickly waned." "Sounds like you're better off without him," Sam said firmly. "Perhaps," Hannah agreed, though at the time it felt like one more loss in a season of losses. They fell silent, each lost in their own thoughts as the fire burned lower. Eventually, Sam stood and added another log. "It's getting late," he said. "You should get some rest." Hannah nodded, suddenly aware of how intimate their conversation had become. "Yes, of course. Good night, Sam." "Good night, Hannah," he replied softly. As she lay in bed that night, Hannah found herself wondering what it would be like to stay at the Double R, to build a life in this wild, beautiful country. To build a life with Sam. The thought should have frightened her, but instead it filled her with a warm, unfamiliar hope. Days passed, settling into a comfortable routine. Hannah took over the household tasks, freeing Sam and Hank to focus on the horses. She discovered a previously untended herb garden behind the house and set about reviving it, pleased to find many of the medicinal plants her father had taught her to use. A week after her arrival, Sam received a reply to the telegram he'd sent to Hannah's aunt. He brought it to her as she was hanging laundry on the line behind the house. "It just arrived," he said, holding out the paper. Hannah took it with trembling fingers, suddenly afraid of what it might contain. Her eyes scanned the brief message. "Relieved you are safe. Stop. Regret to inform you I am relocating to Chicago end of month. Stop. Husband's business requires move. Stop. Cannot accommodate you currently. Stop. Will write with new address when settled. Stop. Aunt Margaret." Hannah read the message twice, then lowered it slowly. "She's moving to Chicago," she said numbly. "She can't take me in." Sam's expression was a mixture of concern and something else Hannah couldn't quite identify. "I'm sorry," he said. "That leaves you in a difficult position." "I have nowhere to go," Hannah said, the reality of her situation crashing down upon her. "No family, no prospects." "You have here," Sam said quietly. "You can stay at the Double R as long as you need to." Hannah looked up at him, searching his face. "I can't impose on you indefinitely, Sam." "It's not an imposition," he insisted. "You've been a tremendous help around the place. Hank says the house hasn't looked this good since it was built." He hesitated. "And I've enjoyed having you here." A warm flush spread through Hannah at his words. "I've enjoyed being here," she admitted. "Then stay," Sam said simply. "At least until you decide what you want to do next." Hannah nodded slowly. "All right, thank you." That evening, as they sat at the table finishing dinner, Sam cleared his throat. "I've been thinking," he began. "The town of Silver Creek is growing. More families arriving every month, but there's no one with medical knowledge closer than Tucson." Hannah looked at him curiously. "What are you suggesting?" "You have medical training, even if it's informal. You could offer your services, nothing complex, just basic care, setting bones, delivering babies, that sort of thing." His eyes were alight with the idea. "There's a real need, Hannah, and it would give you independence, an income of your own." Hannah considered the possibility. It was true that she had absorbed considerable knowledge from her father, and she'd always enjoyed the healing aspects of his work. "Do you think people would accept a woman in such a role?" "Out here, practical skills matter more than convention," Sam said. Besides, most of the women would prefer a female healer for certain conditions. You could start small, build a reputation. The more Hannah thought about it, the more appealing the idea became. I would need supplies, medicines. We can order what you need from Tucson, Sam said eagerly. I have some savings we could use to get you started. I couldn't take your money, Hannah protested. Consider it an investment, Sam replied. When you're established, you can pay me back. His expression grew more serious. Hannah, I know this isn't the life you planned. But you have a chance to build something meaningful here to help people who desperately need it. Hannah looked around the small, comfortable house that had become her refuge. At Sam, whose kindness had saved her from a fate too terrible to contemplate. At the opportunity he was offering her not charity but partnership. I'll do it, she decided. I'll become Silver Creek's healer. Sam's face broke into a broad smile that made Hannah's heart skip a beat. You won't regret it, he promised. The next day, they rode into Silver Creek together to begin preparations for Hannah's new venture. Sam was careful to time their visit when he knew Wallace would be at his mine, not wanting a confrontation to spoil their plans. The small frontier town looked different to Hannah now, not as a place of terror, but as a community in need. They visited the general store, where Sam introduced her to the proprietor, a friendly man named Davis, who expressed immediate enthusiasm for Hannah's proposed services. My wife's expecting our fourth in 3 months, Davis told her. Having someone with medical knowledge right here in town instead of hoping the doctor can make it from Tucson would be a blessing. Word spread quickly as they moved through town. By the time they reached the small vacant building that Sam suggested might serve as Hannah's clinic, several women had approached her with questions about her experience and services. It's not much, Sam said apologetically as they inspected the dusty interior of the former assayer's office. But it's centrally located and the rent is reasonable. Hannah walked through the space, already envisioning how it could be transformed. A waiting area at the front, an examination room in the back, shelves for medicines and supplies. It's perfect, she declared. Sam's expression brightened. Really? It just needs a good cleaning, some simple furniture. She turned to face him, suddenly overwhelmed by his belief in her. Thank you, Sam, for everything. Before he could respond, the door opened behind them, and they turned to find Jeb Wallace standing in the entrance, his bulky frame blocking the light. Well, Wallace drawled, his eyes shifting between Sam and Hannah. Isn't this cozy? The hero Cowboy and his auction prize setting up house in my town. Sam stepped forward, positioning himself between Hannah and Wallace. We're just leaving, Wallace, no need for trouble. Trouble, Wallace repeated with mock innocence. I'm just welcoming the newest resident of Silver Creek. His gaze slid to Hannah, and she suppressed a shudder at the cold calculation in his eyes. Though I must say, Reed, if I'd known what was under that sack, I'd have bid $1,000, maybe more. That's enough, Sam said, his voice tight with controlled anger. Wallace smirked. You know, I own this building, and I don't recall agreeing to rent it to you. Davis said it was available, Sam replied. We spoke to him this morning. Davis doesn't speak for me, Wallace said, and I've decided this building isn't for rent after all, not to you anyway. Hannah stepped forward, ignoring Sam's protective gesture. Mr. Wallace, I intend to establish a medical practice to serve the people of Silver Creek. Surely you can see the benefit to the town, to your workers and their families. Wallace's eyes narrowed. A female doctor, that'll be the day. Healer, Hannah corrected. And yes, a female one. Who do you think attends the women in childbirth? Who nurses the sick children? Women have been healers since the beginning of time, Mr. Wallace. For a moment, Wallace seemed taken aback by her direct address. Then his expression hardened. Don't matter what you call yourself, this building ain't for rent, and if you're smart, you and Reed will move on from Silver Creek before something unfortunate happens. Is that a threat? Sam asked quietly. Wallace smiled, revealing tobacco-stained teeth. Just friendly advice between neighbors. Silver Creek can be dangerous for folks who don't know their place. He tipped his hat mockingly. Good day to you both. After he left, Hannah and Sam stood in silence for a moment. I'm sorry, Sam finally said. I should have anticipated he'd interfere. Hannah squared her shoulders. If not this building, then another. "I won't be intimidated by a bully, Sam." Sam looked at her with newfound respect. "You continue to surprise me, Hannah Morgan." They spent the rest of the day exploring alternatives, eventually securing a small room attached to the town's only hotel. The hotel owner, Mrs. Whitman, was herself a midwife of sorts and welcomed the idea of a more formally trained healer in town. "Been delivering babies for 20 years, the stout, gray-haired woman told Hannah. "But these old hands aren't as steady as they used to be. I'd be glad to send folks your way and assist when needed." By the time they rode back to the Double R that evening, plans were in place for Hannah to begin seeing patients the following week. Sam had ordered basic medical supplies from Tucson, and Mrs. Whitman had promised to spread the word among the women of Silver Creek. As they approached the ranch, the setting sun painting the landscape in hues of gold and crimson, Hannah felt a sense of purpose she hadn't experienced since her father's death. This wild territory, so different from her Boston home, was offering her a chance to rebuild her life on her own terms. And riding beside her, solid and steadfast, was a man who had become more important to her than she'd ever anticipated. Hannah stole a glance at Sam's profile, admiring the strong line of his jaw, the quiet determination in his expression. In saving her, he had given her more than just freedom, he had given her a future. The question that lingered, unspoken between them, was whether that future might include him in ways beyond friendship and business partnership. As they dismounted at the ranch, their hands brushed briefly, sending a jolt of awareness through Hannah that was impossible to ignore. Some questions, she decided, would answer themselves in time. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity as Hannah established her practice in Silver Creek. The small room at the hotel was transformed into a functional, if modest, clinic with a curtained examination area, shelves of carefully labeled medicines and tinctures, and a desk where Hannah kept meticulous records of her patients. Word spread quickly, and soon Hannah found herself busy treating everything from minor injuries to chronic ailments. The miners' wives came first, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence as Hannah's gentle manner and effective treatments won their trust. Children followed, brought by mothers grateful to have medical care without a 2-day journey to Tucson. Even some of the men began to seek her out, particularly after Hannah successfully set the broken arm of a miner caught in a cave-in. When she extracted a bullet from the shoulder of a cowboy injured in a dispute over cards, her reputation was solidly established. Sam rode into town with her most mornings and picked her up in the evenings, concerned for her safety despite her assurances that Wallace seemed to have lost interest in harassing her. In truth, Wallace had been conspicuously absent, having departed for business in Tucson shortly after their confrontation in the empty building. One evening in late October, as they rode home together, Sam broke the comfortable silence between them. "The Harvest Festival is next weekend," he said, keeping his eyes on the trail ahead. "Whole town turns out for it, dancing, food, games for the children." "It sounds wonderful," Hannah replied, waiting for him to continue. Sam cleared his throat. "I was wondering if you might like to attend." "With me?" Hannah felt a flutter of anticipation. "As your guest, as my—" Sam hesitated, then turned to look at her directly. "As the woman I'm courting, if you're amenable to that." The directness of his proposal took Hannah's breath away. They had been dancing around their growing feelings for weeks, neither quite ready to acknowledge the deepening connection between them. "I would be very amenable to that, Sam," she said softly. His smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. "Good, that's good." They rode the rest of the way in silence, but it was a different kind of silence charged with possibility and the sweet anticipation of a future unfolding before them. The night of the Harvest Festival arrived crisp and clear, with a full moon illuminating the town square where lanterns had been strung between buildings and tables laden with food lined one side. A small band of local musicians played lively tunes, and couples were already spinning across the makeshift dance floor. Hannah wore her best dress, a deep blue calico that Mrs. Whitman had helped her alter to fit properly and had pinned her copper hair up in a style that felt both practical and festive. When Sam arrived to escort her from her small room above the clinic, his appreciative gaze made her cheeks warm. "You look beautiful," he said simply, offering his arm. Sam himself had made an effort for the occasion, wearing a clean shirt and vest, his dark hair neatly combed, his usually stubbled jaw smooth-shaven. Several women cast admiring glances their way as they joined the festivities, but Sam seemed oblivious to anyone but Hannah. They danced, ate, and mingled with the townspeople, many of whom greeted Hannah warmly as Doc Morgan. Even Davis from the general store introduced her to his very pregnant wife with evident pride, as if Hannah's presence in town was partly his doing. As the evening progressed, Sam led Hannah away from the crowd toward a quiet spot beneath a large cottonwood tree at the edge of the square. The music and laughter created a pleasant backdrop to their private moment. "Are you enjoying yourself?" Sam asked, his hand still holding hers from their last dance. "Very much," Hannah replied. "It's wonderful to see the community come together like this." "It is," Sam agreed. "Though I have to admit I'm mainly enjoying watching you. You've become a part of this town, Hannah. People respect you, depend on you." Hannah smiled, touched by his observation. "I never expected to find a place for myself here. When I left Boston, I thought I was leaving everything behind, and now I think perhaps I was heading toward something, not away from it." She looked up at him, gathering her courage. "Toward you, Sam." The tenderness in his expression made her heart skip. "Hannah," he began, then stopped as a commotion from the direction of the saloon interrupted the festivities. A group of men were spilling onto the street, loud and clearly intoxicated. At their center was Jeb Wallace, back from Tucson and in a belligerent mood. He spotted Sam and Hannah beneath the tree and changed direction, heading straight for them with an unsteady gait. "Reed." He called loud enough to draw attention from the nearby dancers. "Still playing house with your auction prize, I see." Sam stepped forward, his expression hardening. "You're drunk, Wallace. Go sleep it off." Wallace ignored him, his bloodshot eyes fixed on Hannah. "You know he only bought you because he was too cowardly to let a real man have you," he slurred. "Probably hasn't even betted you yet, has he? Too afraid to treat you like the woman you are." Hannah flinched at the crude words but held her ground. "Mr. Wallace, you're making a spectacle of yourself. These good people are trying to enjoy their evening." Wallace's face contorted with anger. "Don't you lecture me, woman. This is my town. These are my people." He gestured wildly at the crowd that had begun to gather. "I built Silver Creek from nothing." "You exploited Silver Creek," Sam corrected, his voice steady despite the tension evident in his stance. "You don't own these people or this town." Wallace's hand moved to his hip where a revolver hung in a worn holster. "I own whatever I say I own, Reed. Including that woman if I decide I want her." Several gasps rose from the onlookers. Sam's expression didn't change, but Hannah saw his shoulders tense. "Go home, Wallace," he said quietly, "before you do something you can't take back." For a moment it seemed Wallace might back down. Then his hand closed around the grip of his revolver. Too late for that, Cowboy. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Wallace drew his gun, but alcohol had dulled his reflexes. Before he could raise it fully, Sam's hand flashed to his own weapon, drawing and firing in one fluid motion. The crack of the shot echoed across the square, followed by a stunned silence as Wallace staggered backward, a look of surprise on his face as a crimson stain spread across his shirt front. He collapsed to his knees, then toppled forward onto the dirt. No one moved for several heartbeats. Then Hannah's medical training took over, and she rushed to the fallen man's side, kneeling beside him to check for signs of life. "He's still breathing," she announced, pressing her hands against the wound to stem the bleeding. "Someone fetch my medical bag from the clinic. Quickly." Sam stood frozen, his gun still in his hand as several men ran to follow Hannah's instructions. Others helped carry Wallace to the nearest building, ironically, Hannah's clinic, where she worked frantically to save the life of the man who had caused them so much trouble. Hours later, exhausted and blood-stained, Hannah emerged from the clinic to find Sam waiting on the porch, his face a mask of concern and guilt. "He'll live," she said before he could ask. "The bullet missed his vital organs. He's lost a lot of blood, but with proper care, he should recover." Relief flooded Sam's features. "Thank God, I didn't want to kill him, Hannah. I just reacted when I saw him draw." "You had no choice," Hannah assured him, sinking onto the bench beside him. "Everyone saw him draw first. It was self-defense." Sam nodded, though the troubled look didn't leave his eyes. "The sheriff's been by, said the same thing. No charges will be filed." He took Hannah's hand, noticing the dried blood still under her nails despite her attempt to clean up. "I'm sorry you had to go through that." "Saving the life of a man who threatened you." Hannah squeezed his hand. "It's what I do, Sam, what my father taught me. We don't choose who deserves healing." They sat in silence for a moment, the events of the evening weighing heavily upon them. Finally, Sam spoke again, his voice low and intense. "When he drew that gun, all I could think about was you, that he might hurt you, that I might lose you before I ever really had the chance to." He trailed off, struggling to find the words. "To what?" Hannah prompted gently. Sam turned to face her fully, his brown eyes serious in the moonlight. "To love you properly, to build a life with you." He took a deep breath. "I know it's too soon. We've only known each other a few months, but when you've lost as much as I have as we both, have you learned to recognize what matters when you find it again?" Hannah's heart swelled at his words. "It's not too soon," she whispered. "Not when you know, and do you know?" Instead of answering with words, Hannah leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, then deepened as Sam's arms came around her, drawing her closer. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing faster, and Hannah could feel the rapid beat of Sam's heart beneath her palm. "I know," she said simply. Sam rested his forehead against hers. "Come home with me, Hannah, not just as my guest or my friend, but as the woman who will share my life. We can make it official as soon as the circuit preacher comes through next month." "Yes," Hannah replied without hesitation. "Yes to all of it." The town of Silver Creek buzzed with the news of Jeb Wallace's shooting and Sam and Hannah's sudden engagement. Some whispered that it was inappropriate, coming so soon after such violence. Others, who had watched the growing connection between the quiet rancher and the educated healer, simply nodded as if the announcement merely confirmed what they already knew. Wallace himself, confined to bed in a room above the saloon under Hannah's medical supervision, made no further threats. Whether it was the near-death experience or simply the public nature of his defeat, something had changed in the mine owner. When Sam visited him a week after the shooting at Hannah's insistence, Wallace grudgingly acknowledged that he'd been in the wrong. "Should have minded my own business," he admitted gruffly. "Town's big enough for all of us, I reckon." It wasn't exactly an apology, but it was enough to ease the tension that had hung over Silver Creek since the night of the festival. Life gradually returned to normal, with Hannah dividing her time between her growing medical practice and preparations for her wedding. The circuit preacher arrived on a bright November morning, and the entire town turned out for the ceremony held in the newly constructed church that still smelled of fresh-cut pine. Hannah wore a dress of cream-colored silk that Mrs. Whitman and several other women had helped sew, adorned with tiny pearl buttons that had once belonged to Sam's mother. Hank stood as Sam's best man, his weathered face beaming with pride as he watched the young man he'd come to regard as a son pledge his life to the remarkable woman none of them had expected to find under that auction sack just a few months earlier. "I, Samuel James Reed, take thee, Hannah Elizabeth Morgan, to be my lawfully wedded wife." Sam's deep voice carried clearly through the packed church. "To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part." Hannah's voice was steady as she repeated her own vows, her green eyes never leaving Sam's face. When the preacher finally pronounced them man and wife, the cheer that went up from the congregation nearly lifted the roof. The celebration that followed lasted well into the evening, with food and music and dancing in the town square. As the sun began to set, Sam and Hannah slipped away, mounting Sam's black stallion for the ride back to the Double R to their home. They rode in comfortable silence. Hannah nestled against Sam's chest, his arms secure around her as he held the reins. The landscape stretched out before them, painted in the golden hues of sunset, wild and beautiful and full of promise. "Happy, Mrs. Reed," Sam murmured against her hair. Hannah turned her face up to his, her heart so full it seemed impossible it could be contained within her chest. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," she replied truthfully. Sam's kiss was tender, a promise of all that was to come. "When I lifted that sack and saw your face," he said quietly, "I thought I was seeing an angel. I never dreamed you'd become my wife." "Perhaps it was meant to be," Hannah suggested. "All of it, even the terrible parts that brought me here. They led me to you." "Then I'm grateful for every step of the journey," Sam said, urging midnight into a gentle canter as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. 5 years later, the Double R had changed in the years since Hannah and Sam had exchanged their vows. The house had been expanded to include a proper kitchen, a larger bedroom, and 2 smaller rooms for the children who had blessed their union, 3-year-old James and 1-year-old Elizabeth, named for the woman Sam had loved and lost. The ranch itself had grown as well, with additional acreage, more horses, and even a small herd of cattle that Sam had acquired as part of a business arrangement with a neighboring rancher. Hank remained, though he now occupied a more comfortable cabin near the main house and spent as much time bouncing the children on his knee as he did working with the horses. Hannah continued her medical practice, though she had moved it from town to a small building Sam had constructed on their property. This arrangement allowed her to balance her work with motherhood, seeing patients 3 days a week while still being present for her family. Silver Creek had prospered as well, growing from a rough mining town into a more established community with a proper school, a bank, and even a small newspaper. Jeb Wallace, chastened by his near-death experience, had become, if not exactly a friend, then at least not an enemy. He had even contributed to the building of the school, recognizing that attracting families to the area would benefit his mining operations in the long run. On a warm spring afternoon, Hannah sat on the porch of their home, watching as Sam taught young James to ride his first pony, a gentle, spotted mare specially chosen for the boy. Elizabeth played at her feet, stacking wooden blocks that Sam had carved during the long winter evenings. As she observed her husband's patient instruction, his strong hands supporting their son's small frame in the saddle, Hannah felt a wave of contentment wash over her. The path that had brought her to this moment had been marked by loss and hardship, but she wouldn't change a single step if it meant losing what she had found here. Sam looked up, catching her eye across the yard, and smiled that same warm smile that had first given her hope in a moment of despair. He lifted James from the pony and set him on his shoulders, striding toward the porch with his son's delighted laughter ringing in the air. "Mama," James called. "I rode like Papa, I saw," Hannah replied, her heart swelling with pride. "You're a natural horseman, just like your father." Sam set the boy down and took a seat beside Hannah, lifting Elizabeth onto his lap. "He did well," he agreed, pressing a kiss to his daughter's dark curls. "Though I think this little lady might outride him one day. She watches those horses like she's studying them." Hannah laughed. "She's observant like her father. Stubborn like her mother," Sam countered with a grin. As the children played together on the porch, Sam took Hannah's hand, his expression growing more serious. "I received a letter from Stephen today," he said, referring to his brother in Colorado. "Catherine's expecting again, and they've invited us to visit after the baby arrives this summer." "That would be wonderful," Hannah said. "The children would love to meet their cousins." Sam nodded. "I was thinking we could make a proper trip of it. See some of the country, maybe even show you a bit of where I grew up in Missouri on the way back." Hannah squeezed his hand. "I'd like that, to see the places that shaped you before you came west." Sam's eyes softened as he looked at her. "You know, sometimes I still can't believe how it all turned out, that day in Silver Creek when I saw them drag you onto that auction platform." He shook his head at the memory. "I just knew I had to do something. I never imagined I was rescuing my future wife, the mother of my children." My hero, Hannah teased gently, though they both knew there was truth behind the jest. No, Sam said seriously. You're the hero of this story, Hannah. You survived when many would have broken. You built a new life from nothing. You heal people, bring life into the world, raise our children with such love. He brushed a strand of copper hair from her face. I'm the fortunate one to have lifted that sack and found not just an angel, but my heart's companion. Hannah leaned into his touch, her eyes filled with the love that had grown steadily stronger with each passing year. We saved each other, I think, she said softly, and we'll keep doing so every day for the rest of our lives. As the sun began to set over the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and gold, the family remained on the porch, wrapped in the simple joy of being together. The double R spread out before them, a testament to what could be built from courage, determination, and love. In the distance, a coyote called to its mate, the sound echoing across the valley. Somewhere beyond the horizon, other lives were unfolding, other stories being written. But here, on this piece of Arizona wilderness, Hannah and Sam had created something precious and enduring: a home, a family, a love that had begun in the most unlikely of circumstances, but had grown into something stronger than either of them could have imagined. Hannah rested her head against Sam's shoulder, content in the knowledge that whatever challenges the future might hold, they would face them together. From auction block to altar, from strangers to soulmates, their journey had been extraordinary, and it was far from over. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Sam pressed a gentle kiss to Hannah's temple. "Happy?" he asked, just as he had on the night of their wedding, and just as she had then, Hannah answered from the depths of her heart. "Happier than I ever imagined possible." It was enough. It was everything.